My name is Jun Nari, and I am an Omega who cannot bear children. It sounds simple when spoken aloud, but to an Omega, those words echo like a verdict. I've lived with the diagnosis for years now, a rare condition that affects less than 1% of Omegas. My body produces milk, my sense cycles like any other, and my instincts remain the same. Yet the very thing that defines our biology, the ability to carry life, was denied to me. When the doctor first told me I was 22, just finishing medical school. I remember sitting there in that sterile white room, the smell of antiseptic sharp in my nose, my hands shaking as I stared at the ultrasound that showed nothing but empty potential. "I'm sorry, Nari," the specialist had said softly. "You have a congenital uterine defect. It means pregnancy won't ever be possible for you." I nodded, even smiled, and then when I was alone I cried so hard I thought I'd stop breathing. Years later, I wear that diagnosis like invisible armor. I don't date alphas. I don't entertain courtship offers, no matter how well-meaning. I've made peace with solitude, or so I tell myself. I'm 26 now, a practicing OBGYN at Seoul General Hospital. The irony isn't lost on me, an Omega who can't conceive, helping others deliver life. My colleagues tease me affectionately. "Dr. Jun, you have the gentlest hands in the ward. You're the baby whisperer." They don't know the quiet ache that comes every time I cradle a newborn and hand them to a glowing parent. It was a Thursday night when the emergency came in. The hospital lights hummed low, rain beating against the glass walls. I was finishing up a postnatal check when the intercom crackled. "Dr. Jun, our incoming, Omega patient in active labor, complications suspected." I hurried to the delivery wing, tying my gown as I went. When I entered the room, chaos had already begun. Nurses moving briskly, monitors beeping. The patient was young, perhaps early 20s, sweat plastering his hair to his pale forehead. "Name?" I asked. "Lee Hanol," a nurse replied, flipping through the chart. 21. No registered mate. No alpha present. Any complications during pregnancy? He said he was fine until this morning. Now his blood pressure's dropping. Hanol groaned, clutching his belly. "Please, just save my baby." I took his hand, the fragility of his bones startling beneath my fingers. "We'll do everything we can." It was a long, harrowing hour. Hanol's condition worsened midway, his body too weak, too frail. I remember shouting orders, feeling my pulse race, watching as monitors dipped dangerously. And then, a wail. The baby was born. A boy. Tiny, red-faced, crying with the first breath of his life. I placed him in the nurse's arms and turned back to Hanol, but he was fading fast. "Hanol, can you hear me?" I whispered. His eyes fluttered open weakly. "Doctor?" His voice cracked. "You're an Omega 2, right?" "Yes," I said, squeezing his trembling hand. He smiled faintly, tears sliding down his cheeks. "Please, take him." "Take him? My baby. I can't live much longer. Please promise me." I shook my head in disbelief. "You need to focus on resting now." But he pulled weakly at my sleeve. "His father, he'll never know. He can't. He's dangerous, powerful. Please, promise me my baby won't end up with him." "Who's the father?" His lips trembled, and for a moment I thought he wouldn't say it. Then softly. "His name is G1. Han G1." The name meant nothing to me then, but the way the nurses gasped told me it meant everything to them. Han Ji-won, the CEO of Hanol Group, one of Seoul's most feared conglomerates. A ruthless alpha, infamous for destroying competitors and never showing emotion. I looked back at Hanol, whose chest was barely rising. "Does he know about the baby?" He shook his head. "No. It was just one night. He doesn't even remember me. Please, don't tell him." His grip on my hand loosened. His eyes closed. "Promise me," he whispered one last time. "I promise," I said. And then there was only silence. That night I filled out the paperwork myself. No one claimed the child. No relatives. No alpha father stepping forward. So I did something reckless, something that would change everything. I adopted him. I named him Minjun, for bright truth. At first I thought I'd be incapable of nurturing him the way real parents did. I told myself I would just be his guardian. But Minjun had other plans. He cried every time a nurse held him, but when I took him in my arms, he quieted instantly. I would rock him through sleepless nights, whispering lullabies between tears. And then, one morning, my body responded, as if recognizing what my heart already knew. My milk came in naturally, an Omega's instinct awakened by the baby's scent. It felt like a miracle. A small, fragile miracle I could call mine. 5 years passed like a dream. Minjun grew into a bright, curious boy, a mix of mischief and sweetness, his laugh echoing through our small apartment. I juggled work and parenting, often exhausted but never alone. Sometimes late at night I'd watch him sleep and wonder who his father truly was. What kind of alpha could have created such a gentle soul? I thought about the name Han Ji-won but never dared to search. Until fate decided for me. It was an ordinary morning. I was reviewing patient files when Nurse Yoon entered, excitement lighting her face. Dr. June? Did you hear? Han Ji-won himself is coming in today for his annual checkup. My pen froze mid-signature. Han Ji-won? The CEO? Yes. Apparently he booked under a private schedule. He requested confidentiality, only the department head and assigned physician will see him. And who's the assigned physician? I asked, though dread already coiled in my chest. She smiled sheepishly. You. I tried to convince myself it was coincidence. Just another patient. Just another alpha. When the appointment time came, I walked into the consultation room, my heart pounding. He was already there. Han Ji-won. Tall, sharply dressed, radiating authority. His scent, rich, commanding, filled the room. His eyes were cold, assessing. Dr. June Nari, he said, his voice deep, smooth. You're the specialist? Yes, Mr. Han, I managed, bowing slightly. Thank you for waiting. He nodded curtly. Let's make this quick. I don't have much time. His tone was sharp, but there was something weary beneath it, a fatigue I recognized in people who'd spent their lives fighting. I focused on professionalism, conducting the examination in silence. The air between us was thick, his pheromones brushing faintly against mine. I kept my suppressant strong, afraid of reacting. When it was done, he stood, buttoning his shirt. Efficient, he said simply. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Han. He was about to leave, when the door burst open. Papa. Minjun's small voice filled the room. I turned, startled. Minjun, wait. But he was already running, tiny feet slapping against the floor. He ran straight toward Han Ji-won, and before either of us could react, the boy flung himself into the alpha's arms. Ji-won froze, catching the child instinctively. Papa. Minjun said again, smiling up at him. The world seemed to stop. My breath caught in my throat. Han Ji-won stared down at Minjun, at the familiar shape of his eyes, the curve of his mouth, the unmistakable resemblance. His gaze lifted slowly to mine, sharp and confused. Dr. June, he said, voice dangerously calm. What is the meaning of this? And just like that, the past I thought I'd buried began to unravel. Silence, that's what followed Minjun's innocent cry. A silence so thick it swallowed the sound of my own heartbeat. Ji-won stood there, frozen, holding my son, no, our son, in his arms. Minjun giggled, unaware of the hurricane he had unleashed. His tiny fingers clutched Ji-won's tie, tugging playfully. You smell like Papa. Minjun said happily. My throat tightened. Minjun, I said softly, trying to keep my voice calm, come here, sweetheart. He turned, pout forming on his lips. But Appa, that's Papa. I saw him in my dream. The word dream barely registered in my ears before Ji-won's gaze sliced through me like ice. That he slowly set Minjun down, his movements controlled, deliberate, the kind of restraint only a man used to power could possess. Then he straightened to his full height, and his eyes locked onto mine. Dr. June, he said quietly, voice low and steady, explain. I swallowed hard, stepping closer, though every instinct screamed for me to run. Mr. Han, it's not what you think. Then tell me what I should think. His tone was calm, but the faint tremor in it betrayed something else. Confusion, disbelief, maybe even fear. Minjun blinked between us, sensing tension. Appa? He whispered, tugging at my sleeve. Did I do something bad? I knelt and smoothed his hair. No, baby. You did nothing wrong. I looked at Nurse Yoon, who was hovering near the door, wide-eyed. Please take Minjun to the lounge. I'll be there soon. She hesitated but nodded, scooping him up gently. His small hand waved at Ji-won. Bye-bye, Papa. The door clicked shut behind them. The silence that followed felt deafening. Ji-won exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. That child? He turned toward me. He called me Papa. He stopped himself, jaw tightening. Is he mine? The question hit harder than I expected. I stared at the floor. You had a one-night encounter 5 years ago with an Omega named Lee Hanol. He came into our hospital in labor. He didn't survive. Ji-won's expression froze. Hanol, he repeated as if tasting the name for the first time. I don't remember. There were a few nights during those years I wasn't proud of. He sank into the chair behind him, fingers pressing against his temple. The sudden vulnerability in him startled me, the image of a ruthless CEO cracking at the edges. So, you took the child? Yes, I said quietly. He begged me to. He said you must never find out. His head snapped up. He said that. He was terrified, Mr. Han. He thought you'd take Minjun away or worse, that your world would destroy him. He stood abruptly. My world. His voice rose sharp. You mean my company? My responsibilities? You think I would harm my own child? I didn't say that. Then what are you saying, Dr. June? That I'm not fit to be a father? The weight of his pheromones pressed against mine, instinctive and heavy, an alpha's dominance. I fought to keep my composure, suppressants barely holding. I'm saying I kept a promise to a dying man. That's all. He stepped closer, his eyes dark. A promise that involved my son. I took a step back, heart pounding. Minjun doesn't even know he's adopted. He's happy, healthy, loved. Loved by you, Ji-won interrupted. An Omega who decided to play savior. His words stung, but there was no real malice behind them, only hurt, confusion. I could see it in the way his hand trembled slightly at his side. You're angry, I said softly. You have every right to be. But please not here. Not now. Ji-won inhaled deeply, forcing his emotions under control. You're right. He straightened his cuffs, the picture of composed authority again. We'll talk later. Privately. Later? He glanced toward the door where Minjun had disappeared. He's my son. Whether you like it or not, I'm not walking away now. That evening, I sat in my office long after hours, unable to concentrate on a single file. Rain beat against the windows, again as if the universe liked symmetry. I was gathering my things when the knock came. 3 soft raps. Then the door opened without waiting for permission. Ji-won entered, wearing a black coat, his expression unreadable. I sent my driver home, he said quietly. We need to talk. I gestured for him to sit. I figured you'd come. He didn't sit immediately. Instead, he walked toward the window, staring out at the city lights. You said his name is Minjun. Yes. He's healthy. Yes. And he calls you Appa. The way he said it made my chest ache. He's all I have, I admitted. And I'm all he knows. Ji-won turned slowly, eyes gleaming with something softer now, not anger but pain. Do you know what it's like, he asked quietly, to discover you've had a son for 5 years and never knew? That someone else has heard his first word, his first laugh? I didn't answer. The guilt was too heavy. I'm sorry, I said finally, voice cracking. If I'd known you cared. That's the problem, isn't it? He cut in. No one thought I could care. He laughed bitterly. Everyone sees the CEO, the monster who buys companies and breaks men. No one ever sees the man beneath it. His words disarmed me. I'd expected fury. Instead, I found something else. Loneliness. Mr. Han? I started, but he shook his head. Ji-won. Call me Ji-won. If we're to speak of my son, at least drop the titles. My lips trembled around the name. Ji-won. He smiled faintly, a sad, tired smile. So, what happens now, Dr. June? I hesitated. That depends. What do you want to happen? He took a long breath. I want to be part of Minjun's life. But I don't want to tear apart what he has with you. You raised him. You loved him when I wasn't there. I blinked, startled by the gentleness in his tone. You're not angry? I was, he admitted. I still am. But anger won't change the past. And he looked at me, then really looked at me. You're the kind of person Hanol must have trusted completely to leave our child with. That says something. The silence stretched between us, soft but charged. I exhaled slowly. Minjun deserves to know the truth, eventually. But we have to handle it carefully. Ji-won nodded. I agree. He stepped closer, his scent brushing faintly against mine again, calmer this time, warmer. My body reacted instinctively, a flicker of heat rising despite my suppressants. You're brave, he murmured. Raising someone else's child alone, that takes strength. I just did what felt right. He smiled slightly. You remind me of him. Hanol? Yes. He was gentle too. Too gentle for me. Something unreadable passed over his expression. Regret, maybe nostalgia. Then his gaze softened. But you're different. There's fire beneath your calm. The air between us grew warmer. My heart thudded. Ji-won, I whispered, stepping back slightly. This isn't appropriate. Maybe not, he said, his voice quiet but firm. But it's real. For a long moment we just stood there, two strangers bound by a child, by fate, by something we couldn't yet name. The storm outside softened to a drizzle, tapping gently against the glass. Days turned into weeks. Ji-won began visiting more often, at first to see Minjun, then gradually, to see me. He'd stop by after work, still in his suit, carrying little gifts, picture books, tiny puzzles, snacks Minjun adored. At first I stayed distant, wary. But Minjun's laughter whenever Ji-won was around chipped away at my walls. One evening, as we all sat together in my small living room, Minjun asleep between us, Ji-won leaned back on the couch and whispered, "He has your smile." I laughed softly. "You mean Hanul's smile?" "No," Ji-won said, his gaze steady. "He smiles like you, gentle, patient, full of quiet joy." The compliment caught me off guard. "You notice a lot for a man who claims he never slows down." He smiled faintly. "You make me slow down." Our eyes met, the room quiet except for Minjun's soft breathing. Ji-won's hand moved slightly, not quite touching mine, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of his skin. "I don't know what this is yet," he murmured. "But I know I don't want it to end." My chest ached, my heart torn between fear and longing. "You're dangerous, Ji-won." "I've heard that before." His lips curved. "But maybe I'm only dangerous because I finally found something I don't want to lose." His hand brushed mine, a fleeting touch, almost shy. And for the first time since Hanul's death, I allowed myself to feel something new, hope. The rhythm of my days began to change after Ji-won entered our lives. It started subtly, a knock on the door in the evening, a text message confirming he'd pick Minjun up from school, an extra lunchbox appearing on my desk at work with a note. "You forget to eat when you're busy." Ji-won. He was, by all means, still the same alpha the world feared, the CEO whose name commanded attention. But when he was with us he became someone else. Softer. Quieter. Sometimes when I watched him crouch to tie Minjun's shoes or help him build a model spaceship, I caught glimpses of a man who'd been denied the chance to be gentle. Until now. Every Thursday evening, Ji-won came over for dinner. At first, I insisted it was unnecessary, that Minjun didn't need constant gifts or outings, but Ji-won would only smile and say, "Maybe I'm the one who needs it." He was awkward in the kitchen. The first time he tried to help, he nearly set fire to the pan, and Minjun laughed so hard he fell off his chair. Ji-won rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. "I haven't cooked in years," he confessed. "Then you'll learn," I said, handing him the ladle. "Everyone starts somewhere." His eyes lit up with quiet amusement. "Are you always this patient?" "Only with difficult patients or clumsy alphas," I replied. That made him laugh, a sound I'd never heard before, warm and low. Dinner became a ritual. We'd eat together, talk about work, or listen to Minjun's endless stories about school. Sometimes Ji-won would stay late, reading bedtime stories with that deep, soothing voice of his. And when Minjun finally fell asleep, the house grew still. Too still. One evening, after Minjun's bedtime, I found Ji-won standing by the balcony, looking out at the city. The moonlight caught his profile, the sharp lines of his face softened by the night. I walked over quietly. "You look like you're miles away." "Maybe I am," he said, not turning. "I used to think the city was beautiful, all those lights, all that movement. But lately I think I prefer quiet places." "Like my apartment?" I teased gently. He smiled faintly. "Exactly like this." The wind brushed against us, carrying the faint scent of his pheromones, calm, steady, almost protective. My heart skipped once, then again. "You're different from what people say," I murmured. "You've been listening to rumors?" he asked. "Everyone in Seoul listens to rumors about you." He chuckled softly. "And you believe them?" I shook my head. "No. I don't believe anyone who hides behind walls. I only believe what I see." He turned to me then, eyes meeting mine. "And what do you see?" My breath caught. The distance between us was small, too small. "I see someone who pretends to be strong but has been lonely for a long time." For a moment he didn't reply. His gaze softened, something fragile flickering beneath the surface. "You see too much, Junari," he said finally. "Maybe that's what makes you dangerous." "I'm not dangerous," I whispered. "To me you are." The air between us thickened, full of something unspoken. Then mercifully Minjun stirred in his room, breaking the spell. Ji-won stepped back, clearing his throat. "I should go." "Ji-won." He paused at the door, his back to me. "You make this harder than it should be." When the door closed behind him, I realized my hands were trembling. Days passed, and I tried to bury that night under routine, patience, paperwork, and Minjun's endless chatter. But Ji-won's visits didn't stop. If anything, he came more often. One Sunday afternoon, Minjun came running into the living room holding a crayon drawing. Appa. Papa. Look. I looked up from my notes, startled. Papa's not. Before I could finish, Jiwon appeared at the door carrying groceries. Papa's here. Minjun squealed, launching himself into his arms. Papa, I drew us. Jiwon crouched down, admiring the messy crayon family, 3 figures holding hands under a crooked sun. This is beautiful, he said softly. Is that me? Minjun nodded proudly. That's you. And that's Appa. And that's me. Jiwon smiled, his gaze flicking toward me. Looks like we're official then. I rolled my eyes, but warmth bloomed in my chest. Don't let him hear that or he'll start demanding family breakfasts. Then I'll bring pancakes, Jiwon replied simply. And he did. Every Sunday after that he showed up with groceries, an apron, and a ridiculous amount of enthusiasm. Minjun called it Papa's breakfast day. Watching them together, the way Jiwon gently guided Minjun's hands, the way they both laughed when flour dusted the air, I felt something in me unravel. Something I'd locked away for years. That evening, after Minjun fell asleep, Jiwon lingered again. We sat on the couch, silent except for the soft hum of the city outside. Nari, he said quietly. It was the first time he used my name without formality. Oh, do you ever regret it? I turned to him. Regret what? Adopting Minjun. Taking on someone else's burden. I shook my head. He was never a burden. He saved me. Jiwon exhaled softly. You really believe that? Yes. Because before him I thought my life was empty. I thought being an Omega who couldn't bear a child meant I'd never know what love feels like. But he changed that. He studied me quietly. And now, my heart thudded. Now I think, maybe I was wrong about more than one thing. He tilted his head. Like what? I hesitated. The words tangled on my tongue. Like thinking I could live without letting anyone in. His eyes softened. Nari. There was a pause, a long heavy silence where everything unsaid seemed to hum in the air. Then slowly he reached out, his fingers brushing against mine. You've taken care of my son, he whispered. And somewhere along the way, you started taking care of my heart too. My breath caught. His hand was warm, calloused, real. Jiwon, I murmured, voice barely steady, don't say things like that if you don't mean them. He leaned closer, the faintest smile ghosting his lips. I've built empires on what I mean, Nari. I don't say things I don't intend to keep. And before I could speak, his hand rose, brushing my cheek, a feather-light touch that sent shivers down my spine. May I? He asked softly. I didn't answer with words. I just nodded. His lips met mine, gentle, tentative, not demanding, not claiming, just feeling. It was the kind of kiss that didn't ask for more than it gave. A quiet acknowledgement. A promise. When we finally pulled apart, I realized I was crying. I'm sorry, I whispered, embarrassed. I didn't mean. Don't apologize for feeling, he said, brushing away my tears. You've spent too long pretending you couldn't. I let out a shaky laugh. You always know what to say. No, he said, smiling faintly. I only know what I feel. And in that moment I believed him. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains, soft and gold. Minjun's laughter drifted from the kitchen where Jiwon was, once again attempting breakfast. I stood by the doorway watching, Minjun sitting on the counter, Jiwon wearing my apron, flipping pancakes with exaggerated concentration. Appa. Minjun called, spotting me. Papa made a heart-shaped one for you. Jiwon turned, holding up the pan like a trophy. It's lopsided, he admitted, but it's a heart. I smiled, warmth blooming in my chest. It's perfect. For the first time in a long time, I felt something that scared me and healed me all at once. Belonging. As I walked over to join them, Jiwon caught my hand under the table, his thumb brushing against my palm. You're trembling, he whispered. I'm not used to this, I admitted. Being happy. He smiled. Then get used to it. Because I don't plan to leave. I looked up at him, at the man who had once been a stranger, now cooking in my kitchen with our son between us, and for the first time, I dared to believe in forever. When I first met Jiwon, I told myself he would never be part of my life outside of the hospital. I was wrong. Fate had already written him into my days like ink that couldn't be erased. Weeks had passed since the truth about Harem's parentage had come out. Jiwon still visited the hospital under the guise of checkups, but we both knew why he came. Every time he appeared in the corridor, tall and polished in his dark suit, my pulse would stutter. Harem had already started calling him Papa G. The first time I heard it, my heart had twisted painfully, a mixture of joy and fear. "Dr. June," Ji-won said one afternoon, leaning against the doorway of my small office. "You're avoiding me again." I looked up from the file I'd been pretending to read. "I'm working." He smiled, the kind of smile that stripped away his cold CO aura and revealed something rawer beneath. "You're always working. Even when you're not." His words hung between us. I swallowed, setting the file aside. "Ji-won, people talk. If they see you here every day." "I don't care," he said softly, stepping closer. "Let them talk. You took care of my son when I didn't even know he existed. You gave him love. And now I just want to understand you, June Nari." The way he said my name made my breath tremble. I wanted to keep my distance, but the truth was I didn't want him to leave. He sat down across from me. For a long moment we said nothing. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound. Then he said quietly, "Harem looks like his mother, but he acts like you." I blinked. "Me?" "He's gentle. He listens before he speaks. He's always trying to make people smile." Ji-won's gaze softened. "That's you, Nari?" My chest tightened. "You're giving me too much credit." "I'm not giving you enough." There was silence again, but it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was warm, almost tender. That night, Ji-won offered to drive Harem and me home. The streets of Seoul shimmered under the rain, and Harem fell asleep in the back seat, his small hand clutching his stuffed bunny. When we reached my apartment, I tried to thank Ji-won quickly, but he said, "Let me carry him up." I hesitated but nodded. Watching Ji-won lift his son so carefully made something inside me ache, a longing I'd buried for years. Inside, I tucked Harem into bed. Ji-won stood near the doorway watching us. The room was dim, the only light coming from the small lamp by the bed. When I turned, our eyes met. "He's lucky," Ji-won said quietly, "to have you." "I'm the lucky one," I replied. "He saved me when I didn't even know I needed saving." Ji-won took a slow breath, stepping closer until I could feel his warmth. "Nari?" There was a question in his voice, one that neither of us dared to speak aloud. I didn't move. I couldn't. His hand came up, brushing a strand of hair away from my face. The touch was feather-light, reverent. My heart thudded painfully. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. I didn't. His lips brushed mine, soft, hesitant, almost trembling. The world fell silent around us. It wasn't a hungry kiss, but one full of things unsaid, gratitude, fear, longing. My hands found his chest without realizing it, feeling the steady beat beneath my palm. When we finally pulled away, I couldn't look at him. My cheeks burned, my breath uneven. "Ji-won." He cupped my face gently, his thumb tracing the corner of my mouth. "You don't have to be alone anymore, Nari." The words hit deep, so deep I had to look away. "I can't give you children, Ji-won. You know that." He took my hands in his. "You've already given me everything I ever wanted. You gave me my son back. You gave me a reason to come home." Tears pricked my eyes. For years, I'd believed I wasn't enough for anyone, that my condition made me unworthy of love. But in that moment, the weight began to lift. He kissed me again, slower this time. His forehead rested against mine when he whispered, "Let's not run from this anymore." The following days were a quiet blur of warmth and confusion. Ji-won started spending more time with us, not as the CEO the world feared but as a father and something more. He began to draw pictures of the three of us holding hands. "Papa G and Daddy Nari," he'd say proudly. Each time my heart swelled and broke at once. One evening, Ji-won came to pick us up after work. He looked tired, but his smile reached his eyes. "Board meeting?" I asked. He nodded. "But I'd rather be here." We went to the park with Harem, watching him run among the falling cherry blossoms. The air smelled faintly sweet like promises. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ji-won reached for my hand. His fingers brushed mine, tentative, asking. I let them intertwine. He leaned closer, voice low. "Can I stay tonight?" I looked up, meeting his gaze. The question wasn't about desire, it was about belonging. About being allowed to share the quiet spaces of my life. I nodded. "Yes." He smiled softly, and for the first time in years, I felt peace settle over me. That night we didn't need words. Ji-won held me as though afraid I might disappear. His warmth pressed into my back as we lay in the stillness, our breathing slowly sinking. When he whispered my name, Nari, it wasn't a call but a promise. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe I wasn't broken after all. The first hint that something was about to change came on an ordinary morning. I was on my way to work, coffee in one hand, Harem's lunchbox in the other, when my phone buzzed. "Ji-won, We need to talk. My father called. My steps slowed. The chill of early spring brushed across my face, but the cold I felt ran deeper. When I reached the hospital, Ji-won was already waiting in the parking lot, dressed impeccably as always, but his jaw was tight. The moment our eyes met, I knew. They know, I whispered. He nodded. Someone from the board saw me with Harem. With you. My stomach dropped. The chairman of Han Group, Ji-won's father, was a man who valued power and lineage above all else. To him, family wasn't built on love but on legacy. What did he say? I asked quietly. He wants to meet the boy. Ji-won's voice was low, strained. And he said something about you that I won't repeat. I looked away, gripping the strap of my bag. Then maybe I shouldn't be there. He took a step closer, his hand brushing mine. You will be there, Nari. Because you're his parent too. And I won't let anyone erase that. Ji-won's family estate was a world away from my small apartment. Vast, pristine, intimidating. Harem clung to my hand as we walked into the grand living room. Ji-won's father sat rigidly, his cane resting beside him. His mother's expression was unreadable. So, the old man said, voice sharp, this is the child. Harem bowed politely, whispering, hello, sir. The man studied him for a moment. He has your eyes, Ji-won. Are you certain he's yours? Ji-won's voice was firm. There's no doubt. And the Omega? I stiffened, forcing myself to stay calm. I'm Junari. I'm Harem's guardian. His gaze was cold. A barren Omega raising my grandson? My throat tightened. The words struck like stones. Before I could respond, Ji-won stood abruptly. Enough. You don't get to speak to him that way. He raised Harem when I wasn't there. He's family. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Harem looked confused, clutching my hand tighter. Ji-won's mother finally spoke, her voice softer. You're the doctor, aren't you? The one who saved so many in the neonatal ward. I nodded mutely. Her eyes softened just slightly. Then thank you, for taking care of my grandson. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was a beginning. Later that night, back in my apartment, I collapsed onto the couch. The emotional weight of the day pressed down hard. Ji-won came to sit beside me, silent for a moment. I'm sorry, he said finally. You shouldn't have to face that. I shook my head. It's not your fault. It's just hard hearing the truth spoken out loud. He turned toward me, eyes full of worry. Their truth, not the truth. Don't let it sink in. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The dim lamplight pooled between us, soft and golden. Ji-won reached out, fingers brushing my wrist. You know what I realized today? What? That I was proud. Watching you stand there, not backing down. You were stronger than anyone in that room. The warmth of his hand spread through me. I was terrified, I admitted quietly. He smiled faintly. You didn't show it. I let out a shaky breath. Ji-won, do you really think this can work? Us. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached up and cupped my face, his thumb tracing the line of my cheek. It's already working, he said softly. Because I can't imagine my days without you in them. My heart swelled painfully. His forehead rested against mine. The closeness was comforting, the kind that didn't need words. When his lips touched mine, the kiss was slow, grounding. A reassurance. There was no rush, no urgency, just quiet devotion. When he pulled back, his voice was a whisper. Stay tonight. I hesitated only a moment before nodding. Harem was asleep in his room when we sat together in the living room, the city lights glittering beyond the window. Ji-won pulled me gently into his arms. My head rested against his shoulder. The rhythm of his heartbeat steadied me. You don't have to keep proving yourself, he murmured. You've done enough. You are enough. I closed my eyes, letting the words settle. For the first time in years, I believed them. When he tilted my chin upward, our lips met again, unhurried, full of warmth. The kiss deepened, but it was tender, filled with trust. His hands traced small, reverent circles along my back, and I leaned into him, breathing him in. There were no barriers left between us, no fear of being unwanted. Only the soft rhythm of our hearts and the quiet understanding that we had found something worth holding on to. Later we lay together under the same blanket, facing each other. His fingers brushed against mine, intertwining. If I could go back, he whispered, I would have found you sooner. I smiled faintly. You found me when you were meant to. We stayed that way until sleep blurred the edges of the world. The next day the sun spilled through the curtains. Harem's laughter echoed down the hall as he played with his toys, and Ji-won was still beside me, one arm draped across my waist. For a brief, perfect moment, It felt like the world outside couldn't touch us. I turned slightly to look at him. His hair was tousled, his usually sharp features softened by sleep. My chest tightened with quiet affection. I brushed my fingers over his knuckles. "Good morning," I whispered. He stirred, eyes opening slowly. "Morning," he murmured back, voice low and rough. "You're still here." "I'm not going anywhere," I said. He smiled, a real smile, unguarded and gentle. And just like that, I knew. Whatever battle still waited for us outside, us, was worth fighting for. 5 years. That was how long it took for my life to circle back to something that felt like peace. The hospital no longer whispered behind my back when G1 came to pick me up after my shifts. The nurses smiled, Harem waved at everyone, and the rumor that once burned through the halls had faded into something gentler. A story of an Omega doctor, a child he raised alone, and the Alpha who chose them both. Our apartment had changed too. G1's ties and suits now hung beside my lab coats. Harem's drawings filled the fridge. Every corner of the home held something of us, the life we built together from nothing. It started with dizziness. At first, I thought it was exhaustion, too many shifts, too little sleep. But when the symptoms continued, a small, impossible hope began to stir. One afternoon, I locked myself in the staff room with a test. My hands trembled as I waited for the result. 2 lines. For a long time I couldn't breathe. Then I laughed, a wet, shaking sound that turned into tears. Me. The Baron Omega. Pregnant. That evening I told G1. He'd just come home from a meeting, jacket slung over his arm, tie loosened. I could barely speak, the words caught in my throat. "G1, I whispered. I'm pregnant." He froze. For a heartbeat there was only silence. Then his eyes widened and the jacket slipped from his fingers. "Say it again," he breathed. "I'm pregnant." He crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled me into his arms. The hug was fierce, trembling. I felt his heartbeat hammering against mine. "I didn't think this was possible," he whispered into my hair. "You're sure?" I nodded, laughing through tears. "The test was positive. I'll confirm it tomorrow." He pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes bright and wet. Then he kissed me, a slow, tender kiss filled with disbelief and joy. When we finally parted, he cupped my face, whispering, "You've given me another miracle, Nari." We waited a week before telling our son. G1 wanted to make sure everything was stable. I wanted to find the right words. One sunny Saturday morning, we sat on the living room floor, building a tower of blocks. "Harima," G1 said gently, "how would you feel about being a big brother?" Harem blinked, tilting his head. "A big brother?" I nodded, smiling. "There's a baby growing in Daddy Nari's tummy." For a moment he looked surprised, then his whole face lit up. "A baby? For real?" "Yes," G1 laughed. "For real." Harem jumped up and ran to hug me, his small arms wrapping around my waist. "I'll take care of the baby. I'll share my toys, except maybe the blue robot, but everything else okay?" My laughter broke into tears again, and G1 reached over to pull both of us close. The months that followed were slow and glowing. G1 came to every appointment, holding my hand through each scan, listening to the faint rhythmic heartbeat on the monitor with awe. At night, he'd rest his palm gently on my belly, feeling the small kicks. Sometimes, Harem would crawl onto the bed, pressing his ear against my stomach. "Baby, it's me, your brother," he'd whisper. "Don't kick Daddy too hard, okay?" The laughter those moments brought filled every space of our home. It was early dawn when the contractions began. G1 panicked more than I did. Harem tried to pack a stuffed bunny for the baby. Hours later, surrounded by colleagues who had become family, I heard the first cry. A boy, small, perfect, loud. When they placed him in my arms, the world blurred. G1 stood beside me, tears streaming freely. "His name?" the nurse asked. "Jihan," I whispered. "For light." G1 kissed my forehead. "You brought light back into all of us." Weeks later we sat together in the garden, G1, Harem, Han, and me. The spring air was soft, carrying the faint scent of blossoms. Harem leaned against my arm, staring at his baby brother sleeping in my lap. "He looks like you," he murmured. G1 smiled. "He looks like all of us." I turned toward him. "You know, I used to think I'd never have a family." He reached over, taking my hand. "You always did. You just needed the world to catch up." He leaned in then, pressing a slow kiss to my lips, the kind that spoke of gratitude more than passion, of home more than heat. I smiled against him, feeling the warmth of his hand and the steady thrum of the life we'd built. When we pulled apart, Harem giggled. "You, Papa G and Daddy Nari are kissing again." We both laughed and Ji-won scooped him into his lap, tickling him until the garden filled with laughter. That night, after both boys had fallen asleep, I stood by the window with Han in my arms. Ji-won came up behind me, wrapping me in his embrace. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass, but all I saw was the reflection of our little family, the home I once thought I'd never deserve. Ji-won pressed a kiss to my temple. "We did it," he whispered. I looked down at the baby, then at the sleeping figure of our older son curled on the couch. "We did." And as I leaned back against him, feeling his heartbeat steady against mine, I realized something simple and perfect. I was no longer defined by what I couldn't do, but by everything I had found. Love, family, home.